We now come to the subject of strategies to combat ad blocking and increase ad effectiveness. We already talked about this quite a little bit yesterday, not very much in depth, but that will change now. I'm very happy to have Ben Barokas here. He's the CEO from Sourcepoint in the US. And I think I don't have to say anything more because you know better than anybody else how much this is a subject. So Ben, it's your stage.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you. I am very happy to be back here at DIS. I think this is my third or fourth time presenting. It has always been an incredible crowd, and some great discussions are always in the making. I know that I was introduced as being from the US, but the idea around creating Sourcepoint actually happened here in Germany. Maybe some of you were here 4 and 5 years ago when I spoke. I was the founder at that time of a company called AdMeld, and AdMeld was purchased by Google at the end of 2011. At that point, I worked for Google and started an organization called Marketplace Development. And as part of Google, I had many discussions with German publishers, along with my managing director, Thomas Mendrina, who's also here, with many of the largest publishers here in Germany. And the German publishers often asked us about large issues within the ecosystem. And one of the issues that came up on their radar 3 and 4 years ago that began to really start to take a bite out of revenues was this issue around ad blocking. At that point, it started to reach 10 and 15%, and it was something that many publishers said, how do we look at this problem going forward, and how do we recover the revenue that we're losing towards this idea of ad blocking? And after the 10th, 11th, or 12th publisher comes and says, will you please help me, or what should we do about these issues, you start to think that there may be a business in this. And so that was really the genesis of Sourcepoint. So it took us a little while from that point in 2013, 14, from the idea. It gestated for some time, and we established the business in 2015. We here in Germany, our European headquarters is here in Berlin. We have staff in London as well as in Seattle, and our headquarters is in New York. We raised a little bit of money back in June, and we have 20 people around the world and are growing quite rapidly. Our team hails from, again, all over the world, and we have good pedigree from a lot of large companies that have done quite well. So this year has been the time when ad blocking has come to the forefront within our industry. The ecosystem has really woken up, and it has even reached into popular culture. I think much of this has been because of Apple choosing to allow ad blocking within their own ecosystem. Back last summer, or actually last fall, it happened coincidentally the day of Demexco. I don't know if many of you were there, but it was a strange coincidence where Apple decided to allow for these ad blockers to enter the ecosystem and strip out ads. It shot to the top of the app ecosystem downloads on that day. So the top 3 for weeks to come after their release were ad blockers. In America, it also caught fire of the general imagination. Ad blocking was in 2 different episodes of South Park. It was on the most famous DJ of Howard Stern. We were on the Today Show being asked about ad block. So now everyone is thinking about it. Everyone is downloading it. The problem is getting worse for publishers, and this is why it really has become the year of ad blocking. This is a strange question to ask, but how many people have an ad blocker installed on their device for one version way or another, right? So only half of you will admit it. It's probably 3/4 of the people in this room, I would guess, most likely have ad blocking, even for testing purposes. But for those that have not utilized an ad blocker, I think it's very, very important for you to understand the differences in experience with an ad blocker and without an ad blocker. We all have to be very granularly aware of what these threats are to our ecosystem in order to come up with appropriate strategies to combat it. So what's happening this year? Right? We are now in 2016, and it could, if we didn't think it could get any worse, now we have all of these other angles in which we have to deal with. There is a company out there, Shine. I'm sure that there are other companies that are just as malicious, that are offering the wireless carriers, whether that be T-Mobile or Verizon, or we know that there's 2 companies, Digicel and 3, that have signed on with these network blockers that are blocking ads at the carrier level. And for those of you that thought that this problem was only going to be within mobile web, now that we have network blocking, this happens in-app as well. So for publishers that thought perhaps there was some safety within their app and they could sort of ignore this problem even farther, that is not the case. Ad blocking is coming at the network level. Additionally, we find one of the founders of the Mozilla browser has come up with his own app, with his own browser that is stripping out the ads. That is an ad blocker that is similar to the business model of AdBlock Plus. And, 10 years ago, no one knew what a pop-up blocker was, and now everyone's main browser has a pop-up blocker. So this might be a way of things evolving. And finally, one of the assumptions that we went into this business with was that the antivirus companies were going to be ahead of the operating system companies in terms of offering this software out to all the users. We think that in the next year to 2 years, the antivirus companies are going to auto-update all of their users with ad blockers because of the tendency for malware to be distributed through advertising. This is a way in order for them to differentiate themselves. So this may very well happen this year as well. This is also the year that publishers are starting to take action. Are people in the audience aware of what's happening in France right now? Currently, over this past, it started yesterday. Today, Monday? No. Starting on Monday, a consortium of French publishers, including Le Monde, L'Equipe, Le Figaro, have all started blocking users that are utilizing ad blocker from accessing their content. And I'll go in a little bit farther around what this is, but the education has started. There's also a large initiative around the Swedish Internet Advertising Bureau that is bringing a large consortium of 90 of the top publishers in Sweden to have an answer to this ad blocking problem. So what are publishers doing? So as over the past 12 months, we reached out to 150 of the biggest publishers in the world and asked them what they were likely to do in the next 12 months. Most likely, the response was recovery, that they would most like to actually just serve the ads that were going to be served anyway. The biggest and most premium publishers in the world are 90% not the problem. They're not providing the intrusive experiences that make the users actually go towards ad blocking. And so these are the biggest brands that are offering up a good experience, and they're getting punished by other publishers. So ad recovery is a big option. Next along the line is messaging. And messaging is a very, very important part of the equation, because this problem doesn't get solved without having a conversation with the user. One of the most important things that we can do going forward is to say to the user base, we understand that you demand choice, that you don't necessarily want advertising, but you probably don't necessarily want subscription. So you have to choose. But the choice that you cannot have is not providing any payment at all. So as a publishing organization, offering up multiple solutions and multiple compensation methodologies to the user is the only way that the problem is going to get solved. Additionally, content locking, providing some friction between the user and the publisher, is going to be a key part of the equation. And finally, offering paywalls is something that some percentage of the publishers were interested in, but only about a fifth. So just 2 seconds about our platform. We want to offer a whole technology suite to empower publishers to offer all of those things to a user. We are not forcing any one methodology, but it's important for each different audience segment, for each different brand segment, having the opportunity to present different choices to the users of how they want to compensate the publisher. This may be the consumption of standardized advertising. This may be the consumption of customized or personalized advertising. This may be micro payments. This may be macro payments. Different publishing brands will have different solutions that they will offer their user base. There is no one size fits all, in my opinion. So what does user choice actually look like today? This is about logging in. This is about the opportunity of authentication. And this is about having trusted advertising experiences that users engage with and understand that they're trading their attention for the compensation of the publisher. But we also believe that anyone should be or could be paying for content directly to have an ad-free experience. Many publishers are very much okay with providing content without advertising if in fact they're fairly compensated for it. And so there may be a day in the future where there is a payment being made available for the content. And if someone wants the VIP section of the digital content consumption world and they're willing to pay for it, then by all means, let us make it easy for us to provide that to them. So all of these are on offer. What does this look like today? Today we have publishers here in Germany and in France and in other places around the world that are offering to ad block users a choice of whitelist or take the ad blocker and turn it off on one hand, or on the other hand, pay for a 24-hour subscription or pay for a week-long subscription. So this is what's being done now on geo.de. This has to be done in conjunction with a content lock. So the ability to not allow a user to actually engage with the content unless they make a choice. And that's removing the ability for the user to opt out of everything and now saying, Mr. User, you have to opt into some methodology of compensation. And this is what's going on here. This is also what's happening in Build, giving a different option for a month or a year-long subscription or whitelisting the site. Again, with content lock and subscription. Wired offers a similar thing in the US and is now rolling it out worldwide. And on the other hand, there is some sites, L'Equipe, this was taken just yesterday, which they're not even offering a subscription yet. So they're actually just forcing some sort of whitelisting. They're having the conversation, but it's a little bit more harsh. It's do this or do not get the content. And these are all sort of legal solutions versus what I call a technical solution that doesn't allow the ad blocker to take down the notification. I'm sure many of you heard, even with some of the companies that have started to put messaging in place for the ad blockers, that the ad block then goes and takes down that messaging as well. And so we find that having a ironclad solution that doesn't allow for the ad blocker to take down the messaging as being key. Many of you are probably familiar with the legal ruling that happened just recently with Build and Lead, and also a number of other companies joined in, that AdBlock is not allowed to publish the method of taking down the messaging because it amounts to stealing the content. So we'll see how those legal decisions are made into the future, but we believe that there's both a technical as well as a legal aspect to having the conversation with the user that is going to be absolutely crucial. So what are the key learnings that we found over the past activities that we've had with many of the publishers? Don't underestimate the strategic relevance of ad blocking and its effect on the whole organization. And what I mean by that is that many different parts of a publishing organization needs to be on the same, having the same conversation. And this conversation has to be had with the business department within both advertising and subscription businesses. Also has to be had with the editorial department to understand what the user experience is and how much friction is involved with dealing with that user. It also has to be had with the engineering and technical department within the organization as it relates to the site being secure and not allow for tampering by the ad blocking. Additionally, we found that multiple options for the user actually works best. That we think that when the user feels empowered to make a decision versus being forced into a particular thing, this gives a good feeling to the user and creates a stronger bond with the publisher versus what's happening today or what has happened in the past of some sort of antagonistic relationship. We also believe that the collaboration with other publishers, with other members of the advertising technology ecosystem will help. I think having these conversations and making sure that it's out in the open will find solutions, and not just short-term solutions, but very sustainable long-term solutions for ad blocking and substandard monetization in general. And making better ads. So understanding what the Internet Advertising Bureau has put out 2 different standards. One called Lean, which is really about making better creative that is secure, that is not intrusive to users' machines, and really having this value exchange conversation between the user and the publisher. So making better ads for all users. And with that, I'd like to invite Oliver up on the stage. Maybe we have a little bit of a conversation from Gruner and Jahr, and maybe we can take a few questions. We have a publisher, and Oliver's going to share some findings with you after this. But
exactly, you are responsible, for example, for the geo.de solution. So in total, before taking your questions, please, would you fully build on and agree to what Ben said?
Yes. Yeah. Well, basically, it's one major point of Ben's speech is, and also, in fact, one major point of my speech is we publishers should get the communication back. We missed and we failed in the communication with our users concerning the quality of ads and concerning the motives for them installing ad blockers. And for some years, we ignored the problem, more or less. So basically now we have ad block rates in average above 20% over the inventory. Where there are more male users, we have above 30% in some cases. Where there are more female users, we are below 15 or in other directions. But overall, we've simply forgot about communicating to the users, and this is all about the communication. So this is I'm perfectly aligned to that.
And as we talked so much also about personalization since yesterday, is that also a question for personalization, to ask the user what kind of ad do you want? Not only do you want to pay that or no or ad blocking, rather than what is the style? So when would you embrace an ad experience as part of the integrated surface and storytelling and so on? So to go deeper in the communication for what could be the...
Well, there is one good thing about advertising, and this is called scale. So, right, the more you personalize and the more you personalize the ad experience for a user, the more difficult the business gets to be run. And this is between those extremities we have to work, basically to offer more choice to the user, to an ad-light experience, as Forbes has called it. To handle it requires a sales house who understands it, requires the media agencies who understand the business model and who are able to handle it internally and to book into this ad-light experience, because you are then talking not about separate placements but about separate bookings, and it creates additional complexity. And you always have to balance this additional complexity you get into the game against the communication, the positive communication with the users. So that this has to be in a balance.
I think about this oftentimes in kind of phases. I think we can think about things to make it easy in a 90%, 9%, and 1% world for many publishers. 90% of users will choose the standardized ad experience, that they have to have a very high bar of value in order to spend time interacting to customize their own experience. And if they just want access to the content, they'll take the standardized experience and move on. Maybe 9% of the user, again, different for different publishers and different brands, but then 9% of the user base will say, oh, I'd like to give a little bit of data, and in exchange, maybe I'll have an ad-light experience, or maybe I'll have an ad-free experience for some period of time, or maybe I will have some other access to premium content or something like that. And then maybe 1% of the user base decides, you know what, I just don't want to bother with ads at all. I am not price sensitive, I want to pay some extra money, and I want to be on my way. Or I'm very concerned with my privacy. I don't want to deal with pixels, I don't want to deal with IDFA, I don't want anyone to have information about me that I don't actually grant the permission to. But I think the vast majority of users are going to accept the advertising just the way that it is today.
Thank you, Ben, for the moment. Your questions? Please, yeah, there's somebody in the fourth row from behind. If you quickly introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Julian from Ringier Africa. How do you see native ads fit into all of this? If you give a user the opportunity to block display, for example, would you then still have native ads completely in there, or would you have to treat that differently again? Because they to be blocked.
Well, there are positive and negative things about native advertising. So the positive thing is that if advertising is close to the content, it is received well by the user normally in normal occasions. Because and especially if the advertised product has a relationship to the content, which is the original idea of native advertising, as far as I'm concerned. That's good. On the other hand, imagine a world where everything is so native that you couldn't distinguish advertising from content. So the journalistic experience and the journalistic quality we provide on our portals as Gruner & Jahr, as a publisher, is somehow dependent on the fact that we are editorially independent, meaning also that the journalist is free to write whatever he wants to, and the advertising is clearly indicated as advertising and is separated from that. There are even laws about that, regulating that. So basically, if you go into a completely native world without telling advertising from content, you get, I think, once again in an inconvenient situation from the user perspective, because the user has probably less trust in what can be read on the portal.
And also, we'll talk. I'll say two things. Standardized advertising absolutely has its place, and the ability to have, video advertising before video content is crucially important. I don't know if you call that native or not, but we need standards in order to be able to distribute messages at scale. Second, native advertising is still served oftentimes through individual pieces of technology that can be identified as advertising technology and gets taken out just as easily as banners or buttons or pre-rolls.
Thank you for the moment, Ben. We are happy to hear your presentation now, and we have further questions later. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Ben.